Ghosting is one of the most confusing and painful experiences in modern relationships. One moment there's connection, affection, even deep conversations, and the next, silence. No explanation, no closure, just disappearance. If you've experienced this with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, especially a dismissive avoidant, you're not alone, and you're not imagining things. Let's unpack why avoidants ghost. Not to excuse the behavior, but to understand what's really going on beneath the surface. Here are 8 reasons why avoidants ghost. 1. Emotional intimacy feels unsafe. Avoidantly attached people tend to struggle with emotional closeness. When things start to deepen emotionally, when the connection becomes more vulnerable or starts to feel serious, their internal alarm goes off. To someone with an avoidant pattern, closeness often triggers fear, not comfort. The deeper the emotional bond, the more threatened they feel. And when they don't know how to cope with those feelings, they resort to their default coping strategy, distancing. Ghosting in this context becomes a way to escape the discomfort of intimacy without having to explain themselves, because explaining would require vulnerability, which they avoid at all costs. 2. They lack emotional communication skills. Avoidants usually didn't grow up in environments where emotions were acknowledged, validated, or discussed openly. Vulnerability may have been ignored, dismissed, or even punished. So as adults, they often don't know how to express emotional discomfort or relational needs in a healthy way. Rather than saying, "I'm overwhelmed," or "I need space," they ghost, because they don't have the language or emotional safety to express their needs directly. Disappearing feels easier, safer, and more in control. 3. They fear conflict and emotional demands. Ghosting is often a way to avoid potential conflict, confrontation, or emotional pressure. Even if nothing intense is happening on the surface, an avoidant may start projecting future demands or imagining emotional neediness from their partner, even if none exist. Their fear of being emotionally overwhelmed leads them to pull away preemptively. They assume it's just a matter of time before things become too much, so they leave without a word, to avoid what they imagine will be uncomfortable or suffocating. 4. They rationalize and disconnect from their emotions. Avoidants are masters at rationalizing emotional situations. They may convince themselves, "This wasn't serious anyway," or "They'll be fine," or even "It's better this way." By using logic to suppress emotions, they disconnect from the emotional impact of ghosting on both you and themselves. But this doesn't mean they feel nothing. It means they avoid feeling. It's a protective strategy. Underneath, there might be guilt, confusion, or regret. But those emotions are often buried so deep they can't access them, so they just push the situation away and move on. 5. They struggle with accountability and shame. Owning up to difficult emotions or facing someone they may have hurt requires self-reflection, vulnerability, and accountability, all of which are extremely uncomfortable for someone with an avoidant pattern. Ghosting helps them bypass shame. They don't have to face your hurt or disappointment, and they don't have to examine their own behavior. By disappearing, they can escape the discomfort of accountability, even if it means leaving damage in their wake. 6. They may genuinely feel overwhelmed and shut down. When someone with avoidant tendencies gets emotionally overwhelmed, they often experience a freeze response. Their system shuts down, and they may literally dissociate from the situation. In these moments, ghosting isn't calculated. It's a nervous system defense, a way of surviving the perceived threat of emotional intensity. They might intend to come back later and explain, but avoidance kicks in again and delays it, until it becomes too awkward or shameful to return at all. I7. It was never about you. It's their internal struggle. This is perhaps the most important point. Being ghosted by an avoidant is not a reflection of your worth. You didn't do something wrong. You didn't scare them away by being too much. What you encountered was someone who is deeply uncomfortable with emotional closeness and whose primary coping mechanism is withdrawal. Their disappearance says far more about their wounds and fears than it ever does about your value. 8. Can they change? Yes, but only if they choose to heal. Avoidant attachment patterns can absolutely be healed, but only when the person becomes aware of their patterns and makes a conscious choice to do the inner work. That means facing their fear of intimacy, learning emotional regulation and communication, processing past wounds and unresolved attachment trauma, and being willing to sit in discomfort rather than run from it. Until then, these patterns, including ghosting, are likely to repeat no matter how strong the initial connection was. Ghosting by an avoidant hurts deeply because it often comes after a period of emotional connection, and the sudden silence feels like betrayal, abandonment, and confusion all at once. But underneath their withdrawal isn't hatred or indifference. It's fear, it's emotional immaturity, it's self-protection. Understanding the why behind their actions can't take away the pain, but it can help you find clarity, peace, and most importantly, release the idea that their disappearance was your fault. You deserve presence, consistency, and emotional availability. You deserve a relationship where love is expressed, not hidden. And most importantly, you deserve someone who doesn't run when things get real, but leans in and chooses connection.